Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this interesting session today. I think we'll just wait for a couple of more minutes by the time others start joining in. I understand it's a working day for everyone. So till the time I think everyone joins, let me do my customary discussions, on the slide, which I always start with. A quick introduction about Lorbit, what we are, who we are, and what we're doing in the market for you. We are us, Lorbit is a RegTech company wherein we are offering you SaaS-based risk and regulatory compliance management solutions, which comes integrated with a global regulatory intelligence and also keeps a track of the change management on the laws on the real-time basis. This helps organization be better compliant, get an assurance at the board level, and implement the right corporate governance practices in terms of managing your regulatory risks and compliances. Today, we have a team of 70 plus lawyers and company secretaries through which we are managing around or serving around 250 plus client entities globally. In around 70 plus countries, we have served and provided us services. And today, we are serving around 35 industries and with a very enviable net promoter score, wherein people are willing to promote us into their professional circles of around 45 in the latest survey. We also offer you litigation management softwares to enterprise risk management software to compliance and audit management software. Um, I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of it because either you have attended our previous sessions or you're already our software users. But if in case in your organization you are looking for replacing your existing technology or still haven't used any technology and exploring it, feel free to get in touch with us. We'll be happy to understand your existing challenges and be able to provide you right solutions on top of them. Uh, and I think let's continue the discussion now. I see there are more folks have already joined in. So you've seen our you've seen our topic of the day today, and I'm sure they couldn't have been a better panel than this to discuss on the subject which we are going to talk about. So we have with us Abhishekta Guha. She is a seasoned legal and compliance professional and has worked in the past with companies like Amazon and H&M, and his a real good experience of managing the compliance portfolio for e-commerce companies, which typically gets addressed, affected by this regulation. And she's currently with, working with another leading e-commerce platform in India. Suviksha, she again comes with 9+ years experience and another working as a corporate professional. Um, with the on the top global e-commerce platform, and she's a legal professional who has worked in food and e-commerce industry with Swiggy. She's in the past worked with ITC Infotech, Mahindra, and has also worked on the litigations in Bangalore. Thank you so much, Subiksha and Abhishekta, to take your time out today and discuss on this topic with us. And the surprise element, Mr. Rajendra, sir, we can't see you. If you request, you could keep your camera on. I'm sure you have all known Mr. Rajendra. And thanks for and thank you so for accepting our last minute request to join in the discussion. Mr. Rajendra comes with 25+ year experience in diversified industries, I would say, but primarily into retail, e-commerce, fashion, payment. And as you see, he's ex-Flipkart, ex-Nykaa, ex-Walmart, eBay, and Airtel. His experience on this subject and his understanding of the subject definitely will add a lot of different perspective for us today. Before we get deeper, the discussion is more today to understand this topic. Now the companies which the panelists are representing, they have any role in this particular topic or the discussion or whatever their opinions are. It's only for the discussion's sake and understand, creating a better understanding about the topic with all of us. Um, Welcome all of you on this session, and let's get started with it. So, on this topic, on this agenda today, so one of the common question which was coming to me, when we announced this webinar, um, with many asked, when this is a subject which is more pertaining to e-commerce companies today. Why should everybody be interested in understanding about that, dark patterns? Um, but if I look at the industry and the way the commerce is happening today, I think every company is in a way getting affected with these guidelines. Be it a SaaS company, be it somebody who is trying to sell their goods and services using an online platform. And today look at, even if you don't not selling your products on an Amazon or Flipkart or any other platform, known platform, you're still creating some, an option to buy your goods and services on your own portal, or you're, launching your own, apps to buy the goods and services. So this is an important, topic of discussion for everyone, irrespective of the nature of business you are in. And specifically, why this topic becomes even more peculiar for a legal team to understand is because when in terms of the dark pattern guidelines, again, as we go deeper, we'll understand this. The real action on the ground will actually be done by a team which is not a legal team. Maybe the way the payments are designed, the way the schemes get designed, the way the discounts get designed. It's something which comes from the business team, operations team, sales, marketing team, maybe a tech team also many times. And they try to be innovative and get innovative with the way they can get customer attracted. At times they are not aligned with what the law says, but you don't have to know about the subject yourself. You'll have to train those people also to understand how what impact it can possibly have on your business. So knowing it from a perspective of the business and not just from the perspective of law is very important, and that's what we try to bring in that discussion today. While we also, while we would talk about the nitty-gritties of the law and the guidelines, and its counter effect on other guidelines and the penalties and how business can be prepared. But we'll try to bring this aspect, and I think that'll be very interesting to understand. And I would urge everyone, if you have any thoughts and questions, please feel free to keep typing your questions on the chat box so that we can pick your brains and try and address those either as a part of our discussion or maybe towards the end of the discussion today. So with this, I'll invite Shweta to just give a quick introduction on the subject, and then we'll take it off from there.
Thank you. Good afternoon to all. Thank you. Good afternoon to all. This is Shweta. Welcome to our 9th webinar, Prevention and Regulation of Dark Patterns. So before starting with the main agenda and discussion points, firstly, I would like to reiterate some important points in relation to our topic. Dark patterns, as the name suggests, are defined as any practices or deceptive design pattern using user interface or experience to mislead or trick users to do something they originally did not intend to do by impairing their decision making, amounting to misleading advertisement or unfair trade practices. In one of the discussion document published by Advertising Standard Council of India, ASCI, in November 2022, they had specifically highlighted that 29% of the ads processed by ASCI in 2021 and 22 pertain to disguised ads by influencers, which is a kind of dark pattern. To revolve around the same lines, the Central Consumer Protection Authority had notified guidelines for prevention and regulation of dark pattern on November 2023, which is our current topic of discussions as well. This guidelines basically project to curb the deceptive design practices across various platforms offering goods and services in India. During the course of this webinar, our speakers will enlighten us on the evolution of these guidelines. What is the need for regulating these dark patterns? What are the different types of such deceptive patterns, their impact on businesses and consumer rights, and what are the concerns and confusions revolving around these guidelines? Now, I would like to invite our panelists to proceed further and enlighten all the participants on the topic. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Shweta. Maybe I can just set some context and I'll also let Abhisikta and Rajinder sir come in as required. So I think I'm just taking a quick minute to look at the evolution of dark pattern guidelines, right? If you think about it, first came the Consumer Protection Act itself and the rules. And from there were a lot of protections provided to customers against unfair trade practice. The overarching concept remains the same, which is that it stems from any unfair trade practice. And through the course of from 2019 to 2023, regulations always keep up in line with technology, advent, and social behavior. So given the need of the hour, regulations have expanded to bring in more behaviors within the scope of unfair trade practices and try to regulate them. So there was always protection given to customers under the ambit of unfair trade practice under Consumer Protection Act and rules. And from there, for example, IRDAI noticed that there were some auto opt-ins happening for insurance when you were checking out of a travel portal. So there was a need to regulate that, and there was a circular floated by IRDAI to ensure that there's no auto opt-in. The tenet or the mental model being that customers have to be able to freely choose and be informed to take decisions. So we don't want anybody taking decisions on behalf of the customer. The idea is to enable customers and users to make informed decisions for themselves. So from there, in September 2019, IRDAI passed this circular, and then it moved on to ensure that 2020 is when e-commerce probably boomed in India, and then there was a need to regulate that and also bring in specific protection against e-commerce entities. And there was also a need to ensure that anybody selling directly, even if it's not an e-commerce or a marketplace, anybody selling directly in the online space was also brought in, and any activity that they performed which led to unfair trade practice or which was deceptive or misleading to customers also came under the ambit of regulations. From there, we can see that DOCA also issued guidelines for prevention of misleading ads. And that was a very specific regulation that came out, which ensured that wherever there's a misleading advertisement, and it went on to describe what are the different types of misleading ads and called that an unfair trade practice. Then came ASCI with specific 4 dark patterns. And then we see as of November 2023, 13 dark patterns have been identified. So if you look at the trend, all of these stem from unfair trade practice. And from there on, they specifically regulate and give an idea to customers and businesses on what all practices can be considered to be under this ambit. So there was always protection to customers. This is more about specifying and calling out explicitly what they amount to. And this is also inspired from other regulations in US and EU. Even we had flavors of all of these dark patterns across different regulations, like privacy regulations, similar to EU and US. But I think India has taken the first step in specifically codifying it like this in a very structured way. We can move on to the next slide. Yeah, so if you see US and EU, they have a lot of, they have specific callouts in terms of what amounts to dark pattern and what doesn't, but not in a structured way, the way we have come out with guidelines. Their regulations are specific. They have patterns coming out in the context of privacy and in the context of their consumer protection regulations. So every country, I think, has dark patterns on their radar because they recognize that this is the need of the hour. For example, social media, right? Up until a few years ago, social media was not so popular. But when we realized that influencers and social media are a very big thing, there was a need to regulate that. And I think Jan sir touched upon that at the beginning, that there was a need to bring in influencers also within that ambit, and specifically ASCII enacted the social media influencer guidelines. This was again brought about under the misleading ads guidelines as well. So the regulations have just kept in line with the advent in technology and social behavior to protect customers. Can move on to the next slide.
Yeah, I think just to, on this slide itself, I just want to, take a minute, if you just go back. So maybe, Rajan sir, I want to pick your brains also. See, what I understand here is, you see, buying online is going to be there now. It's the gone are the days when you could go and pick things. And when you're buying online now, it could be anything. It could be you're buying milk, or you may be buying today, trying to take a search for a house on rent, or you are giving your car for services. Even those things which we were traditionally very used to doing physically, everything is trying slowly moving to online as well. Not that brick and mortar and offline options have gone, but online is increasing. And this is going to be a reality. The technology is there, is going to happen. Now, many times it happens, and we have seen it in multiple cases, we get influenced by the advertiser or by the service provider. These India may be the first and the second or the third in having these guidelines, but these guidelines are going to be there everywhere, because people will get influenced, or they will be forced to take certain decisions, or maybe forced to make a buy which they did not want to. So these guidelines, and it's not that it's one can be unaffected by these guidelines. I think all of us will get affected by these guidelines, and it's better we start understanding how it is getting framed, because not just in India, and many times now when you're in the technology world, you are not just selling your products in India, you're making it available globally. And sometimes many you have customers coming from outside of India also, and then with logistics channel getting open, you're trying to sell, you're open to sell outside India as well. All these things are happening in business. So being aware what's happening in India, what's happening outside, I think would help us take more judicious decisions, or give a right advice to the board or to the business teams when we are sitting in the in those board in those business discussions. I think one has to start looking at from those perspectives. Rajan sir, maybe I want to take your thoughts or here.
So thanks. Let's go back a bit at the beginning of this session when you called out that every entity, regardless of what business it's currently operating in what sector it is in, it absolutely needs to have a online strategy and to augment the business. I mean, if you do not have one, then obviously you are you're planning to fail in a way. So every entity, regardless of what products and services it is offering, will definitely need to have a substantive e-commerce play, be visible there. Everybody needs to be, have an omni-channel strategy as you go forward. So I think the point that you made at the beginning of this session absolutely is very valid. Point number two is that yes, because of the intense competition that you have in India and coming in, you have business teams internally, whether it is marketing or product and other functions. They do come up with designs of products and features which in-house legal counsels and at times law firms also in this case will now start looking at how they pass through the mandate or the test of the dark patterns guidelines here. Prevention of dark patterns guidelines. So here you need to see whether it is, let's say, the more recent one I would look at is the tokenization thing, right? The tokenization requirement, which actually makes life very easier for both the merchant side and also the user. But how are you offering it to the customer? Are you making it mandatory for him? Are you giving it a pre-ticked box, or are you asking him that you can, just make a one-time payment? Do not offer your payment facility for tokenization and continue with it, as earlier it was in the case of card on file. So this is one area. There are 2, 3 other clearly. I think a lot of the attendees here and even the panelists, I believe, will agree with me that when you're booking an airline ticket, you normally see an insurance, a feature thrown in compulsorily, and or a charity piece thrown in compulsorily, and you have to untick the box. I mean, I've done that on several travel sites, and I've had to untick the box. And if you don't, then they changed it to shaming, which is covered in the dark patterns, which says that I want to risk my flight, I do not want insurance. Now, who's going to tick on that and still go ahead and buy a ticket? Again, when you actually go about and pull out your card or go back to your payment mechanism, whether it's online banking through which you want to make the payment, you see that the price that you actually saw for the ticket and the add-ons makes the price slightly more, I mean, definitely different than what you actually saw, and the difference is obviously something higher up. There is always a discount coupon thrown in. If you apply the discount coupon, it marginally goes down. So you at that exit point, you think psychologically that, okay, I saw this airline ticket at, let's say, 6,500. Because of the add-ons, it's going to 7,200, but I'm getting a discount and it brings it back to 7,000. And you're fine with that because you see the ticket payout going down by 200, but you therefore do not bother to worry about 500. Same about booking or blocking your seats on airlines when you do web check-in. Certain seats are blocked, you're not able to select those, and those are seats obviously which do not have any pricing attached to it. But the seats that are open obviously have a 150 to 300, can seem very, very minuscule amount, but you look at the total number of seats in an aircraft and the amounts you and other customers end up paying, it's definitely slightly more. So the dark patterns and the nature of a guideline that has come up now actually brings to the fore the kind of features and the hidden messages, or the way entities have been conducting their business and creating a user interface and user experience here. And I've been always saying that the best way to get a user back to your site, which is the entire reason why we actually operate an online business, is to ensure that you are giving him a fair, transparent, and a clear experience which wants to make him come by. Anyone who comes to your site to make a transaction only because he is seeing a price point variety there is obviously a treasure hunter kind of a person, and will go to any other site if he sees a different or a lower price point. Your difference should always be in creating a user experience that draws the customer back to you. But that's a different conversation to have. Coming to the EU and also the US, mandates on dark patterns. I think in the US, the California privacy law, and which calls out how, and which actually applies to a lot of companies wherever they are operating. Again, because internet is borderless, you have to have customers sitting in the EU or in the US. And if you again look at the more recent take on the ESG, for which we had a couple of seminars recently, the mandate is to see which bar is set higher and aspire to be there, instead of adhering to a best as is now kind of a mandated guideline or a regulation, because that is being very myopic in terms of how you will go. I'm not saying you should be complying more than what you are required to, but even your compliance attitude and approach has to be in a manner which is comparable and makes you market ready, because if you are not, then you're losing out significantly in your strategy. Coming to the California Consumer Privacy Law, it does not specifically call out that a particular dark pattern or a feature should have an intent to mislead customers, but that intent can also be seen as a criteria for identifying something as a dark pattern. EU's gone a step ahead. They have also identified similar instances. Their note, which runs into several pages, goes about and says, how would you avoid dark patterns? So they've gone a step further and taken it up to advise consumers about how to see through this and come upon, maybe you can complain about it. And here again, in the EU, obviously the fines and everything are very high. In India, we started on this, as you rightly called out, and I think mentioned by one of the speakers earlier on. There are parallels. There are already existing regulations and legislations which cover certain aspects of dark patterns. This actually lists out what can be identified as dark patterns and how they should once you identify them, you would need to ensure that the entity where you see that or the website where you see that, you complain or you ensure they are taken off and you are not impacted by those. There is a significant cleanup which needs to happen, and these guidelines will go a long way in doing this. ASCII also has come up with a very good note on this. As you observe, they have identified what companies can do to achieve what they're doing. So if you want, let's say, a customer to apply for insurance, a flyer who want to apply for insurance, you should make an offer of that product to the customer in a very open, candid manner. Tell him that, hey, this is available for you. These are the benefits if you go for it. This is the price that you will pay for it if you, and this is what the taxes add up to it when you actually make a payment for. So openness, transparency, clarity in all of that is basically what is driving, because again, internet right from the beginning has always been a faceless transaction without boundaries, and we should always be mindful of how things go. So those are my comments, Jayant, and thank you for that. I would like other panelists to contribute as well. Thanks.
Thank you. I think I would just want to take it from where Rajendra sir left. I think I completely agree with the approach that he's been highlighting and also has been highlighted by Subiksha earlier and Jayant sir. That I think this is a very is a step in the right direction, because this is not only, this gives a lot of clarity in terms of how dark patterns needs to be perceived. Dark patterns as a concept was not new, has been always regulated, just that it was regulated under other wider and broader concepts like unfair trade practices, consumer rights violations, etc. But given the technical nature of the concept, I believe it is easier when it is all in one location. We know how it is to be regulated henceforth, right? So it makes it more precise, and lack of specificity, lack of preciseness makes it cumbersome for both the businesses who needs to comply and also for the regulators, right? So I think it is a step in the right direction where it gives more clarity. Certainly there are certain loose ends that are there in the regulations, which we will talk about in the subsequent slides. But I think there is a lot of clarity in terms of what are those dark patterns that have been identified, and how do we probably go about, and a lot of focus on intent as well. Again, a point that was addressed by Rajendra sir, that the very definition of dark patterns as per the guidelines talks about the attempt to mislead the customers, right? So I think intent here is key. As businesses, our preparedness, I think the core principle of our preparedness should be to align with the intent of the law, rather than understanding, getting into the nitty-gritties, because I think everything will align, everything will fall in place if we are able to align with the principle of the law. And the principle of consumer protection has always been to not circumvent customers' ability to make informed choices, right? So I think that is something which I would agree with everybody else. We can move ahead.
Abhishek, I just want to add one thing to what you said, because when you were talking and I was thinking of that example. So she said, you said good thing about intent. So intent, one has to really understand intent. What is intent? I'm saying is, now if I'm adding 5 rupees to charity. Now my intent could be good, that I want to force people to do charity. Now, and my intent is, okay, I'm just charging 5 rupees. Somebody who's flying, paying thousands of rupees, won't mind, paying a tip of 5 rupee. That could be an intent. But again, this 5 rupee with, where you're forcing somebody to pay it,
Absolutely.
is the wrong intent.
Absolutely.
So one has to, these, and I'm sure for lawyers, when you sit and with the business and trying to reason this out, because business has its own way of convincing and putting these things forward. That intent is good. You have to understand the intent of someone with the intent of law. Those balancing things is what is what is expected in the in the discussion rooms from us.
Yes, I think that's a very good point that you highlighted, Jen sir, because intent is a very subjective term, right? As you said, I would say that if it's a charity, if it's a donation, it's with a good intent, a noble intent rather, right? But I think it's important to understand things in perspective. So when businesses or teams are working on certain patterns or elements, architectural elements to by way of user design or user interface, they need to bear in mind that the intent is not it cannot be seen independently. It has to be seen in perspective with the consumer, with associated with the purpose in question. Here when the customer today, as you again rightly mentioned in the beginning, that today the entire behavior of the customer has changed. The customer behavior in terms of how customers make a purchase has completely changed. Exponential growth in terms of online purchases. So given the current scenario, there is a lot of trust that a customer will come with when they come and purchase online. So when businesses sell online, they need to bear in mind that whatever we do, whatever intent we may have, that should be independently weighed and not seen as a, seen in combination with the context and not independently. So in this case, we should make sure that, we do not do anything without the consent of the customer. While donating, including charity, ads, flyers, check, everything is good. But having a pre-checked box on a donation is trying to circumvent customers' free will, right? And the free consent is again time and again addressed in multiple regulations. It is also recently highlighted in our Data Protection Act very clearly, right? A valid consent will be valid only if it's a free will, if it's a free consent, if it's an unambiguous consent, unbiased consent, right? So we shouldn't design elements where we are trying to circumvent that free will. As long as we're not doing that, everything is good intent, right? So we'll have to weigh it in this manner.
So this is like excellent points, and I just have like two bits to add. Going back to my my earlier experience with telecom, there were entities at that point in time which would activate without a user specifically or a subscriber specifically asking for it, your national roaming, or activate calling between different telecom circles, and you never knew about it, and the only thing is you would potentially get an SMS saying that this is already activated. If you do not wish to have this, please reply no, right?
Yes.
And there was always there's a cost attached to having that pack activated, and you never knew till the time if you're a postpaid guy, you would receive that in your monthly bill, and you would suddenly figure out that, oh, I have to now pay 400-500 rupees more just because this pack was activated. Then you go figure out and get to know that, okay, right at the beginning of this month, my national roaming was activated, and I did not go back and say, hey, I do not want this, take it back. So I think from there, which is no longer obviously happening in in telecom for various reasons, given where we are today as a telecom industry, in e-commerce, to ensure user stickiness, ensure that you are retaining users, you're making it easier for them to come back, or as what is identified here, and we will see as the esteemed panelists will walk us through this one and the slide after, is making it difficult for a user to exit a particular service, right? It's excruciatingly difficult for me to say I no longer want to receive emails. I do no longer want to receive any updates or whatever. But it's very easy for me to go about, and I can just sign in with my Google sign in. If I'm on my website, on my email account is open, I can simply go out there and they ask me if I can sign in Google, and that's it. But if I want to exit, that's a completely different story. They don't want to lose visitors, don't want to go back on that. So any number of things. I'm completely fully aligned with what I just heard here from Vikshita. Thanks.
So I think now we have 13 dark patterns that have been defined by the regulator as part of this guidelines. First one being false urgency. Again, false urgency again is it's tricky because it should not be mistaken as the regulation tries to prohibit you from hosting a legitimate or a genuine sale. False urgency implies that we are trying to create a sense of false urgency or false scarcity, for that matter, to mislead the customer or the user to maybe make an immediate purchase on the platform, etc., etc. right? So the regulation does not say that we cannot host a genuine sale event, for that matter. There are instances where when we're trying to shop, for example, any product, right, on the digital platform, there are instances where we see, you know, pop-ups that read only 2 stocks left or 2 units left. So this 2 units left per se is not a problem. But this 2 units left, if claimed without having accurate information that can substantiate the statement that there are actually 2 units left, is a problem, right? So again, stressing on the intent here. Whatever we try to showcase, it should be with the right intent and should not be done with an intent to mislead the customers. As long as I have the right data flow, as long as I have the right information to substantiate what I'm stating, it is absolutely fine to host a genuine discount or a sale on a platform. That is for best interest for both the customer and the consumer, and not a problem. But yes, a false claim, trying to create a false sense of scarcity when it is actually not the case, is a problem, right? I think in the guidelines they've given certain illustrations also pertaining to the hotel industry, where we say only 1 room left or only 2 rooms left. So that per se is not a problem, but if I do not have accurate information to substantiate it, becomes a problem. Right.
So just one comment on the false urgency, and please continue, because this is like very excellent elucidation of each of these items here. So let's say we're looking at an auction site and you know that there's a particular item in which you're interested is being auctioned. It is essential for you to know what is the floor price. Essential for you to know what is the highest bid so far, and at what time the auction ends. And if these items appear on the screen when you are on that site, they will create an urgency, right? They will push you to either outbid the highest bidder, or need to put that bid in like 20 minutes because there might be a clock that's running down, and you need to put that up. If it's just 2 minutes, you need to figure out if you really want to go about and do that. That urgency is actually something that is necessary for a user to make a decision, right? If you were not told that and the auction closed and given to a bidder where you were ready to make a higher bid, or you would have made a higher bid maybe at a later time, you would feel that you were deprived of that opportunity. So in situations like this, it would not be a false urgency, but in the situations that Abhishita just mentioned now, that there definitely would be a false urgency. I'm just trying to call out how differently it can be applied.
Yes. All right. So yeah, I think again, it's as a creating a sense of urgency on the platform, absolutely okay. But yes, when it is with an intent to mislead the customer, not backed by right information, accurate information, becomes a problem, right? Forced action, again, where we're... Subiksha, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one point to what Sir was saying. I think it's that balance between giving more information to customers without the customers being overwhelmed, but that information actually lets the customer make a more informed choice. So I think in the long run, the only way to build sustainable customer base is to ensure that you have clean, transparent practices. But it's also an intent thing, right? A lot of the times the information you give could be very overwhelming for customers. But in many cases, that same information could act as a trust provider instead of working against the customer. So that informs them better and they're able to make more real-time choices.
Yes, agree. I think this was also stressed upon in the e-commerce rules, where there were certain requirements bordering this, that you should provide enough information to the customers so that they can actually make an informed choice, starting from giving a detailed breakup of the prices that the customer pays, etc., right? Yeah. All right. Forced action also, I think, as the name suggests, it's when you're forcing the customer by way of your design, by way of user interface, to take a decision that the customer would not otherwise intend to take, right? Forcing him to subscribe into certain newsletters, which he may not want to subscribe, as part of the, say, you have to subscribe to this newspaper and not newsletter in order to make that purchase. So these kind of things where you're kind of forcing the customer to do that, or do that one extra step in order to make the purchase. This again would also parallelly be regulated under the Data Protection Act, because here again it is kind of coming in the way of customers' free consent, where you're forcing the customer to design the flow in a way that the customer does not intend to do it, but the customer is kind of forced to do it. That can, sometimes in the illustrations, they've also talked about sharing personal information. Sometimes you might be prompted to share certain personal information on the website in order to make a particular purchase, right? So all of these things have been also regulated under the Data Protection Act, right? Basket sneaking, again, I think as the name suggests, when we try to sneak in additional ancillary services to that particular product, it can be I think Rajendra sir spoke about insurance being added, pre-checked. All of these things, right, can amount to basket sneaking. Again, here we are trying to circumvent that consent of the customer. We are trying to pre-check things. We're trying to sneak in things without explicitly disclosing to the customer. Again, if you go through the guidelines, I think there is an explanation. There's a clarificatory note to this, dark pattern, where they've mentioned that as long as you are, adding services, cost of services or products that have been explicitly disclosed, that would not amount to basket sneaking. For example, there are certain costs which get added at the checkout page when you place an order, right? For example, gift wrapping charges, delivery charges, all of these things. So as long as this is explicitly called out in the breakup, this will not amount to basket sneaking. But where there is we do not disclose, we do not give the customer an opportunity to share his or her consent, and we sneak in those products into the customer's baskets, become a problem, right?
So just one comment just one comment here. In a recently, before a different group of lawyers, it was a closed group that we were discussing the guidelines when they came up end of November, and one point that came up from one of the participants was that customer interest should be agnostic to the platform or the way it's actually being addressed. So offline, online does not really make any difference so long as you're taking customer interest at heart and everything. So therefore, how and in what would dark patterns be applicable to an offline transaction, right? It's a very valid question. I mean, I know it's kind of, because the offline world has been has been around for a longer time than the e-commerce thing started. But let's, to counter that, when we're talking about it, I thought about this, example when you go to the local McDonald's, right, which might be in a mall near you or in a separate outlet or whatever. You have a Happy Meal combo where you have a burger, you have fries, and you have a cola. Now, when you're forced by McDonald's to buy that combo, it's up to you. They of course price the combo at let's say 200, but you are absolutely free to go and buy only the fries, only the burger, or only the cola. And if you buy each of these three things separately, you would pay, let's say, 210 or 215, and you make that decision that okay, and I'm just get a Happy Meal, and I'm still fine with getting what I'm getting because of this. So, these things would not be basket sneaking. This would not be, because you are providing both the options available. And it's been around for a long time, where courts have also determined that so long as you're making it available separately and disclosing it completely clearly to the intended customer about what you are offering, and he has an option to say no, I still want to go only for fries, I only want the burger, I do not want the combo. He is still, if he's enticed and if he really feels that okay, I should go for the other two add-ons, he might go for it. If not, he should be able to take any one of the three. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, give that choice to the customer. Agreed.
In fact, even in forced action, I feel there's a little bit of a misconception, right? Customers might not want to pay for premium. So it's very easy to construe that I am being asked to pay a premium to go ads free. But that's the business model, and it's disclosed upfront. That's not what the dark pattern is trying to regulate under forced action. It's trying to talk about two unrelated services, not about having a tiered content approach, right? It's about if I'm buying X and completely unrelated, I'm required to buy Y to access X, which I wasn't informed about earlier. So that's also one common misconception.
Yeah. Agreed. And on the same lines, right, subscription trap also. We often see that it becomes very difficult on certain platforms to cancel a paid subscription that I've already paid for, right? So the design is the UI is designed in a manner where it is either very difficult to find the cancellation option, or it is obscured, or it's an extremely lengthy, cumbersome process, right? So that's like sometimes forcing a user into providing certain payment details or authorization details, etc., right, in order to proceed. All of these things have been categorized as a dark pattern, and very rightfully so. Interface interference, again, as the name suggests, right? It's when you're trying to interfere, when the interface tries to interfere with the customer's behavior or the customer's actions on the platform, right? You either obscure certain relevant information related to a particular matter, or you misdirect the customer. For example, the cancel button, do you want to shop further, do you want to shop another item, or do you want to continue shopping, is the pop-up, and you see that the cross sign is either in a very light color or absolutely not visible, and the yes is pre-checked or pre-highlighted, right? So that will amount to interface interference again. Yeah, any thoughts on this that you would want to talk about? Any other examples that you would want to highlight? Just feel free. Subiksha and Rajendra sir.
Sure. I think the good segue to the next one and combining with this is that this is the first time I think regulators have gotten very specific and nuanced and granular in regulating UX and UI. Right? That's very specific. Like there are a lot of teams involved in figuring out how the UX UI looks like. Right? There's tech teams, there's product teams, there's design teams, there's marketing teams. So this is the first time that a regulation is extremely granular in being prescriptive about how the UX and UI should be. So in that sense, it's a first. The key concepts of fairness, transparency, ensuring customer autonomy, while that's at the core of it, the guidelines go into specific granular aspects of calling out how should the design be, how should the color be, what should take prominence, what should not take prominence, keeping in line the central theme of customer autonomy in their decision making. So I think that's an interesting part, and we'll have to see how we adapt to this as an industry, because the lines are a little blurry. There are it's quite a gray area in terms of because it's hard to establish intent, right? I think a lot of companies might have the right intent on the other side to not mislead customers, but because of how the design is implemented or because of how it's historically been, it might be challenging to see how to operationalize some of these very granular aspects. So I think that's more a matter of time to see how the industry adapts to it. So if you look at interface interference or bait and switch, disguise advertisement, all of them go into very specific aspects of the design element part of it. And bait and switch also had a reference in previous misleading ads guidelines. I think the intent is to ensure that customers are not baited to come on online platform only to be deceived later to find there's no quantity available or stock available or at that particular price, and be sold an alternative instead. So here again, I think if there is an item that's out of stock, so for example, I see that I'm trying to check for an item and I find it and I go to the final page and I realize it's out of stock. That could be an issue, that because there could be multiple customers at the same time checking out that room or checking out that product, and it could have gone out of stock from the time I started the transaction to the time I concluded it. I think the intent of the regulation here is to call out practices where deliberately someone's trying to upsell a higher price product, but trying to deceive you with a lower price product. So I think that's again where we need to keep the intent in mind, because there could be a few cases like this because of technology that there's a lag and this happens.
Yeah, so what I'm also trying to do to the extent possible, and I think this is a very good forum because I'll have inputs from the other panelists and of course Jayant as well, is when you are completing a transaction on a site that is like selling books, for example, and you identify, let's talk about Amazon, they have a really good collection there. So if you identify a particular book, when you go down and you see more details about the product or the book that you are intending to purchase, you also see a list of books, actually a good gallery or a row of books that says customers who bought this also bought the following. Now these are these are obviously, something to influence you, or maybe that there was also a title that you always wanted to, but it had missed your mind. And when you see that, you say, oh, I want this one more than the one that I'm buying. And you take that out of the cart and you go for something else. Or if that's your day on when you are buying books, you might buy both the books as well. So these things are not dark patterns, right? I mean, what I'm trying to call out is because there are questions that I have fielded, which have coming from e-commerce entities, who I'm working with. I'm not with Nykaa anymore. I'm in my own, advisory now. So, like basically, how do we do a sanity check on what flow we currently have? And when I look at some of the flows, I've been actually calling out that okay, this passes the test. It doesn't have to. It is not in violation of the guidelines that are set out here. So this can continue, but this needs to be definitely toned down, or this is something you need to really take off. So these are valid real life questions and situations that come to play. And I thought we should also talk about, as EU is doing, calling out, or what I think ASCII has done, calling out in what way you can still achieve a legit business interest in a manner that is compliant with the guidelines here. Thank you.
Yeah, moving on to others, I think there's also nagging, which has been called out as a dark pattern. So again, I think there's a fine line, right? If somebody asks you twice, you want to receive offers, updates, and you want to receive exciting offers. That's not an example of nagging. Nagging and interface interference are all examples where you're repeatedly being stopped in the action that you're trying to pursue, and the other action is not adding value to you, and it's stopping you from taking the desired action. So it's a repeated action which is causing annoyance to you as a user and as a customer. There's also the dark pattern identified as drip pricing, which has some overlap with, for example, basket sneaking, right? Because if something snuck into my basket without me knowing, in that sense, the total goes up and I can still opt out of it. But drip pricing also talks about where if I'm comparing price in two different websites, I want to know what the final price payable is in both, so I can make an informed choice, as opposed to having to complete the full transaction upfront for all the websites and then take a final call. So a lot of these elements have some overlaps with other dark patterns as well, and it has to be seen holistically. Then this disguised advertisement, if you look at influencer guidelines that was passed already, that called out that wherever there's an influencer making a social media post, they have to disclose the association so that customers don't confuse that to be their genuine reflection of opinion. Similarly, disguised advertisement is to ensure that customers know which of those are news articles, which of those are paid reviews, which of those are ads. So a lot of the times you as a user will need to know what is the type of content that you see so that you know which of those are sponsored. Then there's also, I'm just moving a little faster on the last three ones in the interest of time. But please feel free to add in comments as we go along. There's also this element of trick question where users are specifically confused with a trick question, right? So a lot of the times there's like double negatives, double positives, like positive, negative, yes, no, not now, never. So those kind of trick questions when they're trying to get your consent is not in a very free manner, right? I think Abhisikta also touched on this in the past, that consent is free when it is given in a very clear manner. So if there are only two options that you have and both have some misleading language or confusing language, it's harder for you to not choose one of those. So that again ends up making you stuck on that loop, which is not a clean practice. Then there is SaaS billing. So if you look at SaaS billing and subscription trap, again, there's a bit of an overlap because SaaS billing is about recurring payments. Subscription trap also talks about continuous recurring payments, especially at a free trial stage if payments are mandated. So in that sense, there is an overlap in the two. You also have payment regulations in India which talk about the need for two-factor authentication. And where there's any biller, you have absolute rights to go to GPay or Paytm or anywhere and cancel that billing. Even though you for that mandate to kick in as a customer, you should have voluntarily consented to it. But with recurring payments, what happens is that it slips our mind. So you're not required to consent to it recurringly, but you do have an option to go and cancel it. But I think with these regulations, even that is being called out, and we'll have to see how the industry adapts to this. Then we also have rogue malware, and this again is already covered to some extent under ID regulations as well. But this is a specific dark pattern where you are promised, or it's made to seem like when you visit a site, it's made to seem like they're trying to help you, but in return, what's actually happening is that you're being compromised. So in that sense, it's the specific intent with which the malware is put in your system that makes it a dark pattern. Otherwise, even that very act is already regulated under IT Act. So these are all the dark patterns, and these are only illustrative. I think more we go along this journey, there may be a few more that get added or tweaked or combined. And these are all regulations. These guidelines apply in addition to the other regulations like privacy.
So, Subiksha, I just want to add a couple of pointers, to what you said. SaaS billing, one, many times when you buy a SaaS product, you say, somebody says, okay, I'm giving this for free. Now, when you're saying I'm giving this for free, you have to call out whether it is conditional or it is free. So, I'm buying the product A and the company is giving me product B as free. But if I cancel subscription of product A, this is okay, subscription B for product B also it is cancelled. Now, but you initially called it free. So if either you have to be very, very specific in that point that the product B's subscription is conditional to product A's subscription. It is not free, right? So those kind of misleading, billings also gets covered as a dark pattern. One very important thing, Mike, I would say, with my experience of working closely with sales and marketing people, and now working closely with the lawyers. No, the one way, we all have to really think and understand the psychology of a salesperson or a marketing person. When they are taught in their colleges, they are taught to be creative. When a lawyer is taught in the lawyer is taught to be clear. Okay. So when I put a line in the contract, I emphasize, I write 1 or 2 extra lines to ensure that nobody has any wrong interpretation of it. I mean, I go ahead and write a scenario also, and that's how our lawyers are wired. Our brains are wired. But when you talk about a sales guy or a marketing guy, his first question is how creative you are. They are not hired for clear, they're hired for being creative, right? So when they're hired for being creative, their mind and their, it works in a manner, and you cannot, that they think very differently. And they write very deceptively and they write very creative. Now, what you as a lawyer I may call it as a deceptive, we will call it creative. Now, one of the common questions with this dark patterns, government calling these out so clearly, you will have in your discussions with the business teams and sales and marketing teams is, boss, agar ye nahi karunga to creativity, sorry, if you don't understand Hindi, but the essence of this, what I'm going to say comes very clearly in Hindi only. बॉस अगर मैं ये नहीं करूंगा तो मेरी क्रिएटिविटी कहां से जाएगी? तुम कह रहे हो कि मुझे बिजनेस बंद कर दो, मैं आई एम स्टॉप बीइंग क्रिएटिव. No, I think this is a battle which lawyers are going to have with the sales and marketing teams when they're trying to explain the dark pattern, because the way I'm saying is government is in the guidelines, they have given examples. When I say forced action, they have given some examples, but it is not restricted to those examples only. So your sales marketing, and think about it, when government is has talked about these kind of examples, they have come from real scenario. Like your, nagging. Nagging is not a sales caller is calling you, every morning, and you want to take a loan without naming the company he'll call you from. But it could also be when you're on your screen and your screen is not getting closed. No, some companies did this, right? They were forcing it. So it will not stop here. The nagging, some guy will get more, some tech guy will get more creative and try to push something else as a form of nagging. So you'll have to understand this and ensure it is understood in a similar manner by the sales and operations team as well.
No, that's right. I think with all of these dark patterns, definitely a gray area and a balance between some creative freedom and marketing freedom. Ensuring that business objectives are met, while maintaining customer autonomy. So that's a fine balance.
Yeah, I think some of the obvious challenges that we've been talking about is certainly there will be a lot of adaptation costs that the businesses have to incur in the process of doing that postmortem into what is their status quo, what are the reviewing their existing processes, their existing UI elements, etc. Right, to see what may be a deviation and try to work on all of that. So I think that will involve a considerable amount of significant adaptation costs to it, shifting mindsets certainly. But I think again, as an opportunity, I think the premise remains the same, that if we try to enhance or stress on transparency and customer trust, that is a very positive change from a business perspective also, right? Competitive advantage is highlighted here. I think anything that we are doing in an ethical manner, trying to bolster a lot of trust and transparency, will be to our advantage. So again, a welcome step both for the consumers and the business. Enhanced user experience, certainly when you simplify a customer's journey, right? A customer's journey on the platform or any digital platform, it is always a better experience. Sir had given the example of tokenization in the beginning, even though this is a different topic, but I think it had simplified a lot of things both for the customers and the merchant, right? So as you simplify the customer's journey while ensuring absolute transparency and giving a lot of trust, I think it's always a very positive change, both the sides, right? And long-term sustainability, certainly, because I think the purpose of why certain businesses would be indulging in certain practices like this that have been defined in the guidelines, the purpose could be to increase the conversion rates, purpose could be increase customer footfall, etc., etc. So all of that boils down to sustainability of the business, right? But I think as long as we are doing things in a transparent manner, ensuring that there is free will, you're giving options to the customer in all possible, if we continue to be as creative as we can, just eliminate those misleading elements, I think we can still have a sustainable model than doing something which can be highlighted later or brought under scrutiny into the scope of any of certain these guidelines, right? Anything that you would want to highlight, Jain sir, Subiksha, or Rajendra sir, please feel free. And also, I think Subiksha also spoke about the right balance, right? While this is, there is a clear need to prevent and regulate dark patterns, a balanced approach, a very specific business-friendly and customer-friendly, that fine balance between the two is, I think, very crucial to prevent certain unintended consequences. I think the language of the guidelines also shows that the intent of the guideline is not to prohibit doing business. It is otherwise, there wouldn't have been certain very significant clarifications given under certain dark patterns. So I think the intent is very clear. Just rest, I think, will unravel as the enforcements happen. I think too early in the day to see how the impact, how it actually impacts the business. That I think will slowly, be unraveled once we have more enforcements and these are actually implemented by the businesses.
One thing which I want to add here is, in absence of specific guidelines from the government, we can call it the creative freedom of designing and selling things the way we want to. But when you have clear guidelines, it's important to understand them, because they are going to be now increased scrutiny, not just from the regulators, but from the users also. Because today, with these guidelines getting clearly published, and I won't be surprised in the months and the quarters to come, government will start advertising about these dark patterns more extensively. They start creating user awareness or consumer awareness programs around it. Now, if you are on the wrong side and your consumer, even if it says 5 rupees, and he goes and files a case against you, even if you end up paying a 20 rupees or 2,000 rupees or 2 lakh rupees to him, that doesn't bother much, but you have got a bad publicity also. That Absolutely. Is something which is going to come and hit you back more, because
Absolutely.
It's not about the fines. It's about the publicity which you will get, the negative publicity which you'll get. That's one thing which one has to be really, really very mindful about.
Yes, yes.
And
Always.
another
I think
aspect-
it's always about. Yeah, Subiksha, please go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it's always more about the reputational damage that happens, that comes with these kind of publicity. And yes, it's I think at this point it's extremely important for the businesses to understand what these guidelines mean for the business, to do a mortem of their status quo as to what are the elements that they have, do an audit, do a review, figure out what may be under the scope of dark patterns, and see how we can work towards making it more balanced rather than being on the wrong side. Yes, Subiksha, please go ahead.
No, that's true. I think the risk that reputational damage is also there, and a lot of the times, because this is a new area for customers as well as businesses, there is also a possibility of some misconceptions, like the example I was giving of free content versus paid content. That could be construed to be forced action when it's not. So in that sense, it could get reported that, oh, so and so company, or like it could be a case, it could become a big nuisance issue as well. So in that sense, it's also important to educate customers on what is the intent and what is the actual harm caused to them. Because if you look at the definition of dark patterns, it is linked to dark patterns read with unfair trade practice or violation of customer rights or misleading. So it's all to be read together to constitute a dark pattern.
Yeah, penalties was a part of the draft guidelines, but eventually when the guidelines were notified, the penalty section was removed. In the absence of that, I think it has to be read with the Consumer Protection Act, and this is how the penalty looks like. Can move ahead. I think this is important. We would maybe just briefly cover this. No buffer period provided for implementation, certainly, because I think the guidelines were notified on November 30th, and it was supposed to be effective immediately. Therefore, like many other regulations, industry does not really have time to comply with it. It is already effective and we need to be compliant, right? So that of course puts a lot of pressure into, because there is a reasonable time that the set of businesses would require to do a postmortem also, or a review of what the status quo is, right? So that remains a problem. Today, I think there are multiple regulators. We've already discussed this in the beginning, that it was always regulated as a concept, just that it was regulated in all different places under umbrellas of big or wider concepts like consumer rights violation, unfair trade practices, etc. Of late, even the BIS authorities are looking at the impact of dark patterns. So I think there are a lot of overlaps here and there. We do have more clarity, that's a good thing, but we still have, and also the regulations also call out that this will be in addition to all other regulations pertaining to that covers dark patterns in any manner and will not be in derogation. So which also puts a lot of burden of compliance on businesses. Right, penalty clause, I think we've already spoken about. Certain ambiguities, yes, I think there's a lot of discretion that has been given to the CCPA. So this may create a lot of, we do not know how this will shape up, because as we speak, I think the decision of the CCPA would be final in terms of any ambiguity and anything. So with that being said, I think it remains to be seen how the regulator really balances consumer interest against the rights of the sellers and businesses. So that is one thing. Regarding intent, I think we've spoken at length about this, that intent here is key. And the very definition talks about misleading, doing things to mislead the customer. So I think it's extremely important for the businesses to go back and brainstorm, try to understand the intent behind their design elements, behind their UI and UX, and then try to decide on the next steps. Because as long as we are aligning with the intent of the law and we are not doing things to mislead customers, and we have certain reasonable defense to our on our side, I think we are good, and it would not really amount to a violation of the guidelines as long as we're not explicitly violating any of these practices that have been called out, right? So intent here is key. That has been called out through all the 13 dark patterns. So certainly an important thing that needs to be considered by all the businesses when they work on implementing a framework to comply with the dark patterns.
I think I couldn't agree more, and that's very, very correctly called out here, because in India, what we are seeing here is again in the nature of guideline. Guideline is exactly that. It's a guardrail. It's something that an entity operating in e-commerce, whether it's a online platform, intermediary, or selling its own products or services, will have to adhere to. And as called out by Abhishita, I think what needs, or what is very central to the whole thing, is whether it is designed to mislead. That's at the core of what it is. So the way I would look at it from the lens of, if something is not designed to mislead, then it should be absolutely clear in terms of the pricing, quality, and a clear choice is provided to the user, whether the user wants it or not. Once the price and the condition and the availability, everything is very clearly disclosed. If those things are there, I don't think it would be a dark pattern. I mean, as I said in the example of being recommended books or other products that you are buying, if a person is buying
That's
interior,
just giving options to
right,
the customer to make a better choice. Agree
you
with you.
still be
100%.
in position to go about and look at other items there, and making
Yeah.
them available or
Yes.
on the website is absolutely great. So long as you are calling out the price and saying that this is different, and what basically is the quality, availability of the product and stuff like that. So that is absolutely essential here to, when you go about complying with the guidelines here. And yes,
Absolutely.
there is an overlap, because there are other legislations, regulations which have, we can stretch over what a dark pattern would actually be. That is not changing. So that's actually going to be the way it is. And the guidelines only call out, as an intent of the guidelines is to call out and say, these are the things that we see very often, and which is, not in the interest of customers. And we want those to be addressed, and we want customers to be aware. I think step further is required, where you might, in contrast, you might want to say light patterns and say that what
Yes.
should be done. I think that's a very different or a positive way of looking at things, and that's where I think lawyers will come in to identify how you continue to be adhering with the intent completely, and also deliver your business objectives. Because guys, remember, if the business objectives are not met, obviously that's not going to be in anybody's interest. But how would you meet them?
Absolutely.
Is this something that's very central to what the compliance function is all about?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this is very precise. To-dos for businesses: conduct audits to check your existing status. I think that is very, very important. Prioritize transparency, avoid misleading language. Again, the intent, just reiterating that, whenever we did not touch upon confirm shaming in detail, because we already spoke about it in the beginning. But yes, the language. It's very important how we design the language of those pop-up messages, or any message that is customer facing, right? Those messages need to be crafted in a way that is not misleading to the customer, right? Or in coming in the way of making an informed choice by the customer. Design with user empowerment in mind. Respect consumer data privacy and obtain informed consent. I think this is anyway regulated already by the Data Protection Act. So very, very important, and I think stressed enough under the data protection regulation, that consent is key. And most of the organizations have already worked on this, and some are working on implementing this. Grievance redressal mechanism was also a part of the e-commerce guidelines, so not new. I think none of these appear very new to us, because all of these were there. These were running into all the consumer regulations that we have in the country. Just that we have a new regulation that is focused on dark patterns. But I think all of these were always there. The core principle of consumer protection has always been this, right? So all of this, I think, is very absolute and remains. Yeah.
And what one important aspect in here is ensuring that the teams who are involved in the business and and design and operation side, they understand the dark patterns. And I think this is going to be a job of the lawyers, legal team, to ensure we interact more with our business teams and make them aware about these aspects. Secondly, as Abhishek, mentioned that there was a penalty in the initial guidelines, the draft guidelines, but right now there is no penalty. But don't go with the penalty, because even if there is a 1 rupee penalty, what will hit you more is not the penalty amount. Again, what will hit you more is the brand impact which will have, and building a trust back is going to be difficult, because in the initial years, till we get attuned to all this, any decision by the courts or any by the regulators, by the district court or consumer forums and all, would get highlighted. And you don't want to be on the wrong side. You don't want a wrong publicity, specifically in the at this point of time. So start, don't worry about, don't focus on the penalties, but focus on the impact which it may have on your business. So that's the awareness I think we have to create. And this, like I would, I was talking about during the data protection webinar, that data protection, or I would say dark pattern, these are the laws wherein the legal team has to collaborate a lot with business, because business will not understand the impact. Business will run the way they want to. But those granular and final aspects about the content and the consent and the intent is something, the balancing act which the legal teams has to do along with the business. So yeah, that's closing remarks from my side. Subiksha, any closing remarks from your side?
I think we've covered most of it, Jen. Just the need for, and this is not just an issue that plagues the online world, right? Consumers' interests are equally important in the offline space as well.
Absolutely.
But we'll wait to see how that kind of comes into the ambit. I'm sure a lot of us have walked in and walked out of multiple marketing mails that we never signed up for. So in that
Yes.
sense, a lot of this, we need to see how this pans out and take a balanced approach.
Right.
Yeah. I think I would just want to leave this group with the thought that I think the guidelines are a welcome step towards a more robust consumer protection framework in the country. While there will be initial hiccups, challenges like there are when there is any new regulation, but I think prioritizing transparency, aligning your goals with the intent of the law will certainly help comply with the law, not only in letter but also in spirit. So, and of course, I think with time, as the enforcements really happen, we will see how the impact really is looking like. But yeah, I think a fine balance between the two would really help. But certainly a step in the right direction, both for the customers and the businesses, is how I would like to see this, and hope that the intent really talks to the how the enforcements and how this spans out in the future.
In fact, what I found interesting is US and EU specifically came out with multiple detailed reports on each of the dark patterns. Some of this is new, like SaaS billing and rogue malware is new, but the 10 dark patterns, EU and US have come out with detailed reports, OECD report, FTC report, staff report, and so on. But their regulations are still, mixed up with privacy and consumer, and they're still thinking of a dedicated legislation. We just thought about it, took some inspiration, and then immediately rolled out a dedicated guideline for dark patterns.
Yeah, I think this was very much needed. And
yeah, if you see this recital 67 of the EU DSA, I think it calls out on what dark patterns are, and the penalties, of course, they are further down in Article 74, I believe. So you're right there. I think I think the approach I found was slightly different. It was also on trying to educate both entities, business entities, as well as customers with regard to what dark patterns are and how you should navigate them, how you should avoid them, how you should. And I also, as I called out earlier in this session, I've seen the Advertising Standard Council of India coming up with when you are doing this and this will actually be a dark pattern, if this is your objective, this is the way you can actually go about and achieve it. I think for every entity that will be a different situation, a different solution, because it cannot be a one size that fits all. And that is where, as in-house lawyers, and when I've been talking to businesses, I see that they have a different approach. Again, because internet by definition borderless, and you will always have customers from one region or the other, it's always better to keep your eyes open and see how you are compliant to what extent with the guidelines or mandates in different regions, which are not directly impacting you, because ESG is as a this actually is a part of this. Like, even if it is not mandated and there is a clear understanding that a lot of what you see in the guidelines is an overlap. You have existing regulations that cover these aspects here in their own way, even providing penalties and calling out misleading advertisements, for example. But when considering how you will go about and have not just a balance, but an intent of being in adherence in letter and spirit, while also, and because that ultimately will sustain your business, if that's a total objective. And one has to be mindful that compliance is not a spanner in the wheel, but it's something which will actually help business create greater growth and numbers, market share, what have you. So
thank you so much, sir. I think this was a pretty interesting session. And a couple of pointers when I'm taking back when I'm when I heard all of you talking on the dark patterns as to how our sales marketing strategies also should be, while we are a B2B SaaS company, not a B2C SaaS, wherein we should be really worried about influencing a consumer decision. But again, very smaller aspect, they get interpreted when it's in the code of discussion, when the consumer complaint comes in. I think one has to be just careful and mindful and see how it spans up. So thank you so much, sir, and thank you, Abhishek. Thank you, Subiksha. It was a pleasure having you all here, and we would also be sharing putting the recording of this session on our YouTube channel. Some of you have requested for the recording session. You could, I think my colleagues have already shared a link to our YouTube channel. You can go there, subscribe to it, so that moment the video is uploaded, you have the access to the video as well. Thank you.
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
I think, Jayanti, we have a question from Deepak Yadav. Maybe somebody could just quickly address that. Shouldn't take just a few seconds. False urgency is also used as a marketing practice by many big brands. How do we come to know that we are crossing the thin line between fair and unfair practice in that case? So, good question. So again, as the name suggests, when we are trying to do any marketing event or any marketing practice, so to say, to sell our brands to the customer, we should just be mindful of the fact that it should not be based on any inaccurate information or a wrong information to mislead the customer. It should be with a pure intent of marketing and getting the customer to buy a product from us, and not with an intent to mislead the customer with some false information about, say, the product is a bestseller without having the right data, or saying the product is this is the last piece available, without you actually knowing whether it is the last piece available. So marketing practice per se is not a problem, but anything that is done with an intent to mislead and is not supported by accurate information is a concern. So that's the thin line that we need to be mindful of.
And just to add to what Abhishek said, see, today, if you have an e-commerce platform, whether you're an e-commerce platform or you're trying to create your own channel through your own websites and apps, see, your inventory is all linked with these channels through different applications. Now, moment you say only 2 pieces left, as long as you have your inventory applications or your backing that up, that you have only 2 stocks left, you can talk about it. But in your stock you have 1,000 stocks left and you're showing only 2 pieces left. trail is always there. See, in the in the technology world, when it comes to a conflict and somebody files a case on you and you will have to justify. See, these trails are always there today. In the technology world, these trails cannot be erased. Okay, so if somebody goes back on that date in your application and find that okay, there was 100,000 pieces left and you were showing only 2 pieces because somebody would have taken a screenshot of it. Okay, now that is what is false urgency, and you have to be very, very mindful, कि user को पता कैसे चलेगा, user को नहीं पता चलेगा, he'll never get to know. But moment you have to justify in front of the authority, these all trails will come out. So that's an important aspect to understand. We cannot, in a technology world, while we can play with the technology, but the technology has every trail, and you just can't say, okay, I deleted the trail. If you, that also is not going to happen. So the moment you try and delete a trail, even if you are not guilty, you will be sentenced guilty. So I think that's one we have to be careful about. Okay, thank you, Shikta, for this and addressing it.
Thank you so much, Jain sir. Thank you, Lord, for having us speakers. Thank you so much.
Had a great time. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. Good day.